Welcome to episode 415 of Salcedo Paranormal, and tonight I am sharing true paranormal stories from the web. As always, you can find all episodes of the show along with links to social media and other ways to contact me at the podcast page, and that is salcedoparanormal.podbean.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. Always happy to hear from you all, whether you have comments or questions or topic suggestions, or stories of paranormal experiences, whether they're your own or from others that you trust. Happy to either read those or have you join me on the show to talk about them. Thank you for listening, as always, whether you are here for the live streams on Discord, or if you listen to the podcast or YouTube feeds, or if you listen to the show on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. KUAP, Digital Broadcasting, and there you can hear replays of 2 episodes of the show every night of the week, and that is at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right before Troubled Minds Radio comes on. So I want to thank, as always, Michael Strange, host of Troubled Minds Radio, and Liam Martin, Rohan of the Exiled Minds podcast, for producing my show and putting the music in there at the beginning and the end that you hear if you listen to the show on the station. If you'd like to support the show, there are some different ways to do that. First of all, you can always share the show with others, rate and review it on your podcast platform of choice. And also, if you, I've written some paranormal fiction and nonfiction books that you can check out on Amazon. Also, that I have direct donation links through PayPal, Venmo, and let me see here, what else? Patreon. If you'd like to donate to the show directly. Again, I am going to be attending the Mid-Michigan Paracon this year in November, first weekend of November. So if you would like to support that trip, again, that's one of the expenses that will probably be happening every year from now on, as much as possible, just to help spread the show to others. So if you'd like to support the show, that is one of those expenses that I have, other than, of course, the usual equipment and research materials. So those PayPal and Venmo and Patreon links are there for anyone who is able and would like to contribute. So I have a few stories to read tonight, and I think I can get to those now. So let me see here. All right. I actually just finished getting these ready about half hour before stream started, so that's cutting it a little bit closer than I usually like, but I'm glad I got it done. So this one says, one night, back when I was around 12 years old, I remember waking up for no apparent reason. I just woke up and was wide awake. I felt like I should sit up and look at the end of my bed. Even though I couldn't see anything, I somehow sensed that someone was there. Not only that, I got an image in my mind of an older woman sitting down, looking out the window. It was as if she was there to keep me company. I have a vague memory of saying something like, "Hello, who are you?" Again, I have to mention that I did not pick up on this woman's presence with any of my normal senses, but I was still able to sense her and what she was doing. I didn't get a response, but I did lay back down and fall asleep again. I felt a sense of calm and safety, and I slept really well, for some reason. It was such a pleasant experience that, even now, 15 years later, as I write this, I am getting a little emotional over it. At the time, the experience was so amazing, I was skipping forward words, to me, that I told my mom about it. She told me that an older woman had lived in the house before us. I'll call her Mrs. H. She used to love holding me when I was a baby and adored me. But she passed away not long after that, so I have no memory of her. But apparently, while she was alive and still living in the house, my room had been her bedroom. Mrs. H used to love sitting there and looking outside at the fields spread out behind our house. Of course, I had not known any of this, but I am sure that what I had sensed that night was Mrs. H. And that's where the story ends. I like this one not only because it wasn't anything really frightening, but because of the way that the writer was able to just know or sense or feel that there was someone there. And I like that there was a connection as well, even though the writer didn't know it at the time. But that's an amazing story. I wonder how often that happens, and people just don't think about it, or they tell other people that they know, their parents or whoever else they're living with, about these experiences. And of course, I think in some cases where people are not as open to these things, that's unfortunately where they'll be told that they were imagining things or worse, whatever. But I wonder how often these kinds of experiences happen that you just don't hear about. So neat story there. And I feel like I didn't have the experience with sleeping, but when I used to, so for a little while, my older sister and her family lived in the same house that my grandparents had lived in. They had both passed away, and I would go there once in a while, and for a while there, my older sister was in a I think one or maybe two bands that played at night, and I would go there and stay just for the night with the kids who were older. They weren't really little kids, but still just older, and so I always volunteered to go there and stay with them and just visit and everything. And I remember that when I was there, some nights when once the kids had gone to bed and everything, and I would just be sitting there listening to whatever podcasts or audiobooks that I was into at the time. I would sense presences, and I feel like it was my grandparents, but also I feel like it was the original owner of the house, possibly, moving around and just keeping an eye on things. And it was an amazing thing because I never saw anything or heard anything. It was very similar in a way to this writer's story where I had no problem. And it was almost comforting in a way because I wasn't there sort of watching over everything on my own. And I wonder now, because the family, there's no one, basically that the house doesn't belong to anyone in the family anymore, but I wonder, I always wonder what experiences, if any, they have had, or if, since they are not directly connected to the family, if they've had any. Or maybe they've only had experiences with the original owner, who apparently, as far as we can tell, likes the house so much that they are there often. Or at least they stop by there often anyway, based on other experiences that I have gone over in the show before. So, but yeah, that makes me think of that whole set of experiences that I had several times, really, while I was there at night. And it was really amazing, especially being into all these things, to just have that sense. And usually it was never anything that, the feeling never got really close to me to where I was at physically. It was always, I could sense them in other rooms, usually in the kitchen, while I would be sitting in the dining room. And so And it was really amazing, that feeling. So anyway, I think I've already said that. I think that's all I have to say on that one. So amazing story there. Glad that everything worked out and it wasn't anything negative. And I wonder what other things may have happened in that house since then, if anything. Doesn't sound like maybe it did for the writer, but I always wonder about the whole history of a location and those kinds of things. So, moving on to the next story here. This one, let's see here. Okay, this one says, I was a child of about 5 or 6 years old back in the 80s when I had an odd experience. My family and I lived in a small house with 2 bedrooms that sat on a dead-end street in a historic town in Tennessee. During the Civil War, there had been a hospital in the area, though no one knows where it was located for sure. But it was thought that the hospital had been located near our street. Artifacts from that time period were also found throughout the area, including on our own yard. These included musket shot. I don't know if they mean musket balls or... Anyway, buttons from uniforms, apothecary bottles, and even cannonballs, among other things. Anyway, at the time of this experience, my mother and I were the only ones in the house. My sister was at school, and my dad was at work, which was only a couple of miles away from the house. My mom was in the living room, and I was in my own bedroom. I remember I was on my hands and knees, playing with my toy cars. I remember pushing one car across the floor until I got to what appeared to be a boot. I looked up and saw that it was a man dressed all in black clothes and wearing a black top hat as well. His pants and overcoat were all black. It was basically a man from another time, standing in front of me. I don't remember seeing any facial features as I got up and went into the living room. I asked my mom who the man was in my room playing with me. My mom picked me up and carried me out of the house, quickly walking over to the neighbor's house so she could use their phone to call my dad. She told him that there was someone in the house, and so he said he would be right there. But when he got to our house and went through it, he didn't find anyone. My parents asked me again what happened, and I gave them the same description I have written here. They asked if the man had touched me at all, and I said no. They asked if I was frightened of the man or of going back into my room, and I said no. The man had seemed friendly enough, and I was never frightened at all. As a child, I was not known to make things up or to lie, which is why my mom reacted as she had. We still talk about the experience to this day because, although I am skeptical of the paranormal, I still can't explain what happened. And that's the end of that story. I wonder, with all those artifacts in the area like that, and it being connected to such a major event, both nationally and then locally, if I don't know if there was some kind of a crossover in time there for a moment, or of course, if it was a spirit, then how were they? Why were they there? Did they just somehow come across the house and everything, or I don't know. A lot of questions there. The items in the ground. So many of those things you would find with a metal detector, and metal seems to be, in a lot of cases, or at least it can be, it can hold energy. And so that doesn't surprise me in a way that maybe there'd be activity there, both between the metal that can contain energy and then just the events in the history of the area. So, I always wonder about this with stories again, sort of getting to what is not reported. I wonder how often people have experiences as kids and they don't have anyone to tell about these experiences for whatever different reasons, whether it's something that happens so fast that they just write it off or just take it as being sort of part of normal life, which I think it is more normal than people think. In a lot of cases, we just don't always notice it. But anyway, I like that the this figure didn't cause any other trouble for the kid at the time, other than, of course, frightening the family, the mom, which I understand. If a kid comes up to you and your kid comes up to you and tells you that, that's I can understand her reaction to that. And it does sound like this figure just appeared in the room. And because it doesn't say that the writer saw this man walk into the room, it was just like he was there. So I wonder about these areas, but I also think really there could be activity at any place at any time. It's just a matter of how much and then who's there to notice it, and just all these different factors. But I don't doubt that some sites that were part of major battles of any kind could leave energy behind as well. So yeah, as usual, I don't know how to explain that, but I'm glad that it wasn't a negative experience, at least for the kid writing this years later. So I often wonder too about that, how that works. Because you would think a person would realize if they appear to someone else, to a child, that maybe this might happen where the child would go to their parents and then it would possibly frighten the parents. So is that something that they just don't think of? Or but also, I mean, the figure wasn't there anymore after the child got up and got out of there, apparently, so maybe they realized it after the fact. Hard to know for sure, again, what's going on there. So I have one more story here, and that'll be it. Let's see. Gotta scroll down to it, I think. And, okay. There it is, okay. This one says, "This isn't about an apparition of any kind. It's about footsteps. My family has a small cabin in the woods in a part of New York, the state, with many hills. It is a beautiful place to visit and has no dark or terrible history as far as my family has been able to find. But if you stay overnight in the cabin, you may just hear footsteps on the porch. Sometimes you will even hear the footsteps walking throughout the kitchen as well. But again, no one has ever seen anything strange there. The sounds of boots walking across the porch are pretty hard to miss and fairly easy to recreate. But when you recreate the footsteps, there is one key difference. Due to the cabin being built on stilts, your footsteps will send vibrations through the floor. But when our visitor stops by, no one ever feels those same vibrations. My father and I are very skeptical and have tried to recreate anything that could have caused what we have heard. But we haven't come up with any answers yet. The gutters are secure. Nothing else we could find and move across the porch made those same noises. If it had been an animal of any kind, you would think that someone would have seen it by now. Also, the visitor has stopped by the cabin many times throughout several years, going back to before I was born. And even though this sounds like something you would hear on a paranormal TV show, the footsteps only happen at night. Beyond any logical explanations we haven't found, all we can say is that someone has visited the cabin many times over the years to walk through the porch and the kitchen. And that's where that story ends. What I find really amazing about that is the point that they make about the vibrations. And I just wonder now how often, when people hear footsteps, are there actual vibrations along with them? I feel like I have heard some stories where people claim to feel the floor shake or shift beneath the footsteps, but then other times people don't mention that. So does that mean that there were no vibrations, that there was just the sound? And then what does that mean? How is that done without? How does one thing exist without the other, unless it's somehow literally just a different kind of energy, and or just a replay of those sounds happening to where there's the sounds in the room or in the space, but they're not having an impact. There is no force beneath them, in other words, to make the floor vibrate, to send vibrations through the floor at all. I also think, I'm guessing it would depend on the type of floor, floors and ceilings and all those different things. I think there's probably a lot of factors there, but that's the first time I've ever heard that or seen that pointed out in a story of an experience to that degree, where the writer and their family actually checked on these things to figure out what was going on, and then realized this. So it's these sort of these things that you pick up on, and people pick up on when they have experiences that are always amazing to me. These details that maybe someday will lead to other thoughts or ideas, or even possibly theories as to how all this works. And so I really like that story, and I wonder if it's a residual thing, if it's not causing any actual vibrations in the floor, or if it's, I don't know. It could be that, could just be energy playing back over time. But then I also wonder, I think that there's always the possibility of it being a conscious being, but then how are they making those sounds without causing those vibrations? So, as usual, only questions here. That sounds like another show I listen to a lot. Anyway, but thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you all on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal. Take care.